All right, all praises to Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shah. Double honors to the apostles and the men at Great Millstone, and to the elect Akim. May the spirit of Yahweh by Hashem Yahweh Shah continue to sup with you. And this is part one of a series, if you will, which is entitled "Our Salvation is Nearer Than When We Believed." And you got the new contenders just came up. The next gainsayers, if you will, them morons at our Rebel Alliance. They call themselves posing a challenge to the members of GMS, and the question was resurrection versus reincarnation. And them idiots don't get it. All right, resurrection and reincarnation is the same thing. Which the Apostle Gabar, it was a spiritual cut session. All right, he broke that down. Okay, but going into this topic, salvation is nearer than when we believed. That word nearer, that's a heavy word, because when you really look at it, when you really spiritual and the Most High really dealing with you, and you really serious about this thing, and you understand what's going on for real, all right, this beautiful tale, this beautiful story, this truth that's unfolding, when you understand that, you'll know that the way time works, that's why that word nearer, all right, like for an example, that scripture say nearer than when we believed. For an example, Apostle Tahar, let's use him for an example. He's been in this truth 31 years, Apostle Tahar, you can easily say, well, Apostle Tahar been waiting, 31 years and now it's nearer. Well, that's true, but in reality, he's been waiting longer than 31 years. But all the times that he came on the planet in reincarnation. That's why the scriptures say nearer, because it's dealing with multiple lifetimes. Now we're in the lifetime which the kingdom is nearer. Is drawing nearer. All right, 2,000 years ago, it wasn't nearer. All right, and I'm gonna go into the scripture. This is out of the book of Isaiah 56:1, and this is out the Old Testament. That's the reason why I'm bringing this out. Thus said the Lord, keep ye judgment and do justice, for my salvation is near to come, and my righteousness to be revealed. So that's the Lord saying, my salvation is near to come. And that salvation started with Yahweh Shah, being the good feet that bring the Salakia, the feet that preach the good news. Because when Yahweh Shah came on the scene, he read the scripture about about the Messiah coming to heal the brokenhearted, and the scripture. He said, "This day that scripture has been fulfilled in your hearing." And they rejected him. But, that's what the Lord talking about right here when he said, my salvation is near to come. But ultimately, the ultimate salvation is when Yahweh Shah return in his glory. And that's the salvation that is near. Even though it is written here, in the Old Testament. So just using time as a measuring stick, we knew that scripture couldn't have been talking about in the times of Isaiah, because we know now that the time is near. All right? And let me get another scripture real quick. This is Acts 1:6. When they therefore were come together, they asked of him, saying, Lord, wilt thou at this time restore again the kingdom to Israel? Yeah, so they was asking back then about the kingdom being restored, which is the salvation that is near. All right, they thought the salvation was then, but the salvation is near now. And the men that was out there asking that question, which was the original 12 and the close members, the rest, most of the governing body at that time, they was asking, was the salvation at that time? But now is the time of salvation. We're living in some monumental times, because it's deep. All the apostles, they wrote the scriptures for our understanding. But guess what? We them same guys who wrote the scriptures. We're back, man. We're back to understand what we wrote. You know? All right, this the book of Revelation in the 10th chapter, I believe that is. We're going to see. Yeah. This the book of Revelation 10 and 11. And he said unto me, thou must prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings. Now that's the Apostle John, the one who wrote the book of Revelation. And there's no account of him ever leaving the island of Patmos. So what is this talking about here when it said, and he said unto me, thou must prophesy again before many peoples and kings and nations and tongues and kings, Salakia. Yeah, so how was he able to prophesy if it wasn't no records of the Apostle John leaving off the island of Patmos? How was he going to be able to prophesy again before many peoples and nations and tongues and kings? Because of reincarnation. And what was he going to prophesy? The good news, the salvation that is near. Because it wasn't near back then when he was on the island of Patmos. He had to continue that preaching because back then, 2,000 years ago, they was preaching that. What they was preaching, what Yahweh Shah commanded them. He commanded them saying, preach that the kingdom of heaven is at hand. The salvation is at hand. So they was out preaching that 2,000 years ago. But guess what? It wasn't at hand in the carnal mind state. It was at hand. Yeah, truly it was. Because 1,000 years is nothing but a day unto the Most High. So it was truly at hand, yeah, but it wasn't at hand in the sense of how you average people look at it. You got to be spiritual to be in this thing, man. That's how we know that a lot of guys who, claim to know the truth and claim to be in this truth, they could be sincere, but they ain't on a level of seeing this thing clearer, man, because that's why Apostle Paul said, though my outer man perish, my inner man is renewed day by day. Yeah, that's us seeing everything clearer every day. You supposed to see things much clearer. All right, and that's a form of the salvation getting nearer. Because when you look at the tangible, the transition of night turning into morning, you see it gets clearer and clearer. All right? It gets clearer and clearer. And that's why that scripture says, for our salvation is nearer than when we believed. All right? That's why that scripture says that. Our salvation is nearer than when we believed. Matter of fact, I'm going to get it again. This is the book of Romans 13 and 11. And that knowing the time, that now it is high time to awake out of sleep, for now is our salvation nearer than when we believed. Yeah, when did we believe? 2,000 years ago and beyond. All right, because you got some prophets like the prophet Ezra. He was on the scene, maybe approximately like 500 or so years before Yahweh Shah. All right, and this what he said, right? This is 2nd Ezra 6 and 7. Then answered I and said, what shall be the parting asunder of the times? Or when shall be the end of the first and the beginning of it that followeth? So why is Ezra asking this question? What shall be the parting asunder of the times? He might as well could have been saying, when is salvation coming? Basically, because that's what he's saying. Because that's what he was concerned with. When is salvation coming? So that's why when you read the scripture, our salvation is nearer than when we believed. That's not talking about just on this side. When you was born here, you've been in the truth 5 years now. It's nearer than when you first believed 5 years ago. No, It's talking about it's nearer than when you first believed overall, man, going back to whenever time periods you came on the planet. And primarily 2,000 years ago, because that's when all the men of the Lord was basically identified. And we were sealed really then, or before the beginning of time, but now we're being gathered.